Good morning and welcome to Looking Up. This is a podcast for Christian women, and we're so glad that you've joined us, and we're honored that you've chosen to spend your time with us. And the purpose of what we're doing is just to point you to God and to remind you that there are so many things to look up and to enjoy about life and to praise God for. And that's what we want to do here. So I'm here with my co-host, Kathy Pollard. And how are you doing today?
Really great. I feel like we have lots of great things to talk about and share, and I'm excited to get started and do that.
Yeah, well, our topic is it's kind of an emotional. It is an emotional one, but we'll get to that in a minute. But so how is everything going on at the homestead?
It's going good. I don't know where to start. I have all these things that I jotted down to remember to share with you, and I'm thinking, which one do I want to talk about first? But
pick one.
Okay, well, sauerkraut. We'll talk about that.
Sauerkraut. That's an interesting one to start with.
You don't look very excited. You sound like Neil. He's like, oh, great. Well, it's so good for you. Okay. Don't think about the gross canned stuff that you find in the store, but it's so good for you. It's got all the probiotics. And anyways.
Fermented cabbage, isn't it?
Emily, it is. Yeah. Emily had these ginormous, humongous cabbages. And so she wanted to know if she could come over and we could make kraut together. So we did that yesterday, spent several hours chopping and massaging and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, you put salt on the cabbage and massage it to break the juices loose out of it, and then you shove it into your jars and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, it was so great because it was just Emily and me and Rich, of course. And I've told Neil before that some of my favorite memories of his mom is when we would go visit her, and it seems like we would spend all this time in the kitchen sitting at the table, and we'd snap green beans or something for dinner and visit, and I just have these sweet memories of that time together. Well, I felt like that's what happened yesterday. And we're just, for the longest time, just cutting cabbage, and we're just talking the whole time, talking and visiting. And so it was the perfect day for me. It was perfect. And then, of course, got to love on Rich. And so we made, between the two of us, and we didn't even go through all 6 cabbages because they were so huge. It took so long. We only used 4 cabbages, and we made 13 quarts and 1 pint of sauerkraut. And so for those of you who are watching,
pretty.
This is what it looks like when you put it into the jar, and you can ferment this anywhere from 5 days to up to about 3 weeks, and then put it in the refrigerator, and you can just put a little scoop on the side of your plate, or put it on tacos or in a rice bowl, or whatever you want to do. But it's just
so it's cabbage, and what else is in it?
Salt.
So the juice is all from the cabbage itself?
Yeah, the salt helps release some of the juices. So you can either massage it with your hands, or you can just put it straight in the jar and beat it with a wooden spoon until the juices start breaking free.
Did you ever wonder things like that? How did the first person figure that out?
Yes, I've thought about so many things.
Let's just massage this cabbage until it starts
let's
oozing juices, and then let's put it in a jar and let it sit for a few days.
And then... You're not making that sound very good. Anything that involves oozing juices can't be that good.
Yeah, I was thinking the other day that may be one of those words that we don't like. There's certain. My niece Lauren has a list of 7 or 8 words that she says you can never say in her presence.
Like moist.
One of them is moist. Yes.
Yeah, I know. Our boys were the same way.
Don't say the word. So Lauren,
it used to be a good thing.
Moist.
Moist. Yes.
She hates it.
Well, and this morning today's Neil's day off. We're recording on a different day. So we made waffles. We just kind of had a leisure breakfast, and we made waffles, and it was just, real butter, farm fresh eggs.
Making waffles.
Yeah. And we had found this syrup at the Homestead Festival that was hickory syrup. So instead of real maple syrup, it's real hickory syrup. And it kind of has a smoky flavor to it. Yeah. And we had picked up these peaches from the peach truck the other day. So we sliced fresh peaches over it, and it was just... These are the good days of summer.
Yes, it is. Well, that's great. Exciting. I might be convinced. I might try your sauerkraut. I don't know that. Confession, I don't know that I've ever tried it. It just looks gross to me. And I have that texture thing. So
yeah.
But if you make it,
It looks different than what you get out of a can or a jar.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's surprising to me. I always thought there was like vinegar or something. Does it kind of make a vinegar? Like when you, does the juices make a vinegary kind of smell to it?
I mean, not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that goes to show you that since I haven't tried it, I can't really talk about it. Well, that does sound
And
like a good day.
the reason they say you can, within 5 days, it's going to ferment. So if you don't want it very strong or very sour, you can start eating on it then. And the longer you let it sit and ferment, of course, the stronger it's going to be.
Did she grow the cabbage?
She did not. Scottsville gives away. They have food giveaways every week. And I forget which company it was that gave last week. It was all produce, a ton of fresh produce. And they still ended up with gobs left over that they were trying to give away to everybody. So
where does it come from?
I can't remember where they said they got it from. There's
like
a company
type thing.
Yeah, there's a company that is now helping Scottsville give away food by providing groceries and produce and things like that.
That's such a great thing. It reminds me of not super similar, but the church in Katy where Jordan and Aaron are, they helped to organize a 4th of July thing on whatever night, Monday night, Tuesday night. And they had like 200 of their own members, which I thought was fantastic.
That is
but
great.
They put something, one of the members put something on the Katy Facebook page, and they had like 30 or 40 visitors from the community.
Oh, that's awesome.
And she sent me some pictures, and it just looked like such an amazing evening to have so many come from the community and a great outreach. So it sounds like Scottsville has a great outreach too.
Yeah, and my sister was just telling me we got to spend Wednesday night with them because Neil spoke on their summer series at Portland. So we had dinner with them ahead of time. And by the way, while I'm thinking about that, she made a pie that was a chocolate hazelnut pie and kind of a Nutella kind of a thing. And she said it's her new go-to. So maybe we can persuade her to share their Christy, if you're listening. Maybe she can share the recipe with us in the Looking Up group. But why was I talking about her? Oh. She said that they did the same thing. They had a 4th of July event, but they opened it up to the community and they had a really great turnout and good fireworks. And
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, good idea.
Well, we had the kids this weekend. I know I mentioned last week that we were going to, so we are on the other side of it now. It was,
with your
it was
fort.
So fun. Yeah, that, I posted a little video of that yesterday. They didn't use that as much as I thought they would, but it was just so hot outside. But I think they'll use it more when it gets a little cooler, and we want to put some hammocks out there and just some little things. And that was fun. But they played on the swing set, and John had put that. I had to convince him to put a slide from the deck down to the yard, because I thought they would love to just, climb up this little ladder, slide down into the yard and run down to the swing set. And they did that a lot. And they came back up to the deck via the rock climbing wall, even the 2-year-old. And, the whole time I'm like, oh, I'm worried she's going to fall off, but she's so hardy. She can take care of herself. She's a third child that knows how to take care of herself.
That's right.
But I have to tell you that one of the things Jackson loves, and he's 6, he loves to go looking for arrowheads, and they find a lot of them out on the property. Although, John, here's a little confession, and Aaron, if you happen to be listening to this with Jackson in earshot, don't let him listen. But John, she knows about it, but he bought some on Amazon, some that are not real. And then he took them and scattered them around on the property because, you want them to enjoy it. They have found some real genuine ones, but the ones that he found this time were the ones that John kind of planted out there. But we went one morning, I guess it was Monday morning, Jackson and I, it's just the two of us, and we were walking outside, and it's just what he loves to do more than anything else is to go arrowheading, is what he calls it. So and cute. So, there's still lots of cedars and things out there, and we're walking along, and he turns around and looks at me and says, "Now, you're younger than Pa, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you ought to be able to climb through here then." And he's holding the branches back for me and just being so solicitous and kind and sweet. And it was just fun. It's fun.
Little trailblazer gentleman.
Yeah. One-on-one time with each of them. And so we went down to Katy and picked him up and brought him back. And on the way back, we stopped to see Mom, and she got to see the kids and loved that. And So that was, I mean, we did that all weekend and they kept us on our toes and we were pooped by the time they went home, but it was just a lot of fun.
Pooped.
Okay, I've got my timer running and it took 10 minutes for me to say the word pooped, but it was a different kind of poop. And now that you brought up the other kind of poop. Oh, we are so immature sometimes, aren't we?
Well, I feel like it's our theme now.
I hope not.
No.
I sincerely hope it's not our theme.
Yeah, we'll change the subject.
Yeah. Well, but on a related note, though, related, Alyssa is potty training Turner right now. So we've gotten several FaceTime excited calls from Turner, and the modern way of potty training is to let them run around. You have to stay home a few days and not go anywhere, but let them run around without a diaper so that they can feel the sensation, otherwise with the diaper, it's just normal. So we got some really cute little phone calls from Turner, and she's pretty excited because she's managed to do what her mom is teaching her to do. So
yay,
celebrations. Yeah.
Find all kinds of reasons to celebrate, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now Brian and Shannon Ketchum are here. He's been all over the place this summer, and he's raising support. He's a Bear Valley student. It's an interesting story how he became a student, but they've been helping us do a lot of things with the Bible Passages website, and he's 30 or 31, something like that. So he has a whole lot more technologically savvy understanding than we do. I mean, we try to stay up to date on some of that stuff, but it's not easy. No, it just changes constantly. So they're helping us to do some of that.
And I still am in awe of the fact that he's 30 or 31, because, we've known him since he was a baby also.
Yeah, because he was born and raised in that congregation in Virginia where you and Neil were for a long time, Cold Harbor, right? Yeah, it was funny because when they first came to Bear Valley, I remember hearing the name Ketchum and thinking, we know some Ketchums in Virginia, but this was in Colorado, and it's just funny how small
I
the world is.
I know. I love all the connections. Yeah, he and Gary were best friends. And so when we found out we were moving to Colorado, that was one thing that Gary was upset about, is leaving Brian behind. They were good friends.
Well, maybe they can rekindle their friendship.
Yeah. Well, we have a half price books here. Do you have one of those?
Not well in Austin, yeah.
In Austin. And so they had a day this past week where everything in the store was $1.
Wow.
Yeah, one day only. Everything was $1.
Was it crowded?
And so it really wasn't too bad. I mean, it was more crowded than it normally is, but it didn't make it not fun. It wasn't unbearable or anything like that. But we just popped in for a few minutes, and Neil and I both scored. I mean, I found this book. Did I bring it down here? Yeah. This book has actually been in my Amazon cart. It's The Life-Giving Table.
Okay.
Nurturing Faith Through Feasting One Meal at a Time. It's by Sally Clarkson. And I've been wanting to read it. I just haven't pulled the trigger on buying it. So I found it there for $1. It's in great shape. And then, you know how we mentioned the Mitford series on the episode where we talked about books that we love? I found her cookbook.
Yeah. I love that
goes with that whole series. And it is there's not a mark, there's not a dog-eared page. It's in pristine condition. $1.
You did the thrifting this week.
That's right.
That has Esther's marmalade cake in it. That's one of the. That's a recurring cake that goes throughout the series. Esther Bollett's orange marmalade cake.
I already love how the author puts these little extra tidbits of information in there about here's why I made this character do this or that, or and then I found this cookbook, New England Farm Girl.
Looks like a good one.
Looks really, really good. Yeah, just lots of things. I found some gardening books and farm hands' favorite pies. Look at that. And I found one called Grandma's Garden.
Wow, look at you.
I didn't even bring them all down. We just found so many good things. But, we've converted my upstairs office into our home library. Yeah. So we both walked up there with our big stack of books and, took a drink up there and just sat in a few minutes of quiet and kind of perused through our goodies. And
I noticed when we were there, you have another bookshelf up there that I don't remember being there last time. Did you put several new ones up?
We did. We actually found on Marketplace this beautiful set of 3 tall bookshelves. And it was funny because, I was communicating with this lady via messaging and arranging for Neil to go pick it up with his truck. And after he got there, she messaged me again and said, "Small world, we actually met your husband at a gospel meeting." And it turns out they're members of the church, because they live about, I don't know, 45 minutes from here, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And turns out they're members of the church. And Neil didn't even have room in his truck for all three of the bookshelves. They connect together, but it's like three full-size bookshelves. Yeah. And so her husband ended up bringing the third one back all the way here to our house for us with his truck, but they weigh a ton. So it was not
fun.
Did
you have to get them up the stairs yourself, or
I didn't, but the boys helped Neil get him up there, but we just love it. So now we have books all around and we have comfortable furniture in there, and we just go up and relax. And
yeah, that's a cozy room and has a good view out the front yard, right? Front yard?
Yes. Yeah. Front yard. Yeah.
Well, where else did you put the other two bookshelves? Because I only remember as you walk in on the right.
Well, we moved them in there also. There was one, the guest bedroom you stayed in had bookshelves in it. We took that out. And so we have bookshelves all around the room.
Okay.
In there now.
Like a library.
Yeah. I really wanted to paint before I did that, kind of like some academia kind of colors, that almost moody old world library kind of feel. I kind of wanted to do that, but you know how I am about painting, so that'll probably never happen.
No, I'm a terrible painter. John was making fun of my painting just the other day, but if you do a bad job, then you don't have to do it. He'll just say, "Oh, forget it, I'll do it myself." That's what he thinks about doing dishes, but I don't let him get out of that. Yeah, that's one of the cracks that he always makes about the heart event and how, we didn't know if he was going to retain all of his cognitive function. He'll say, "I didn't forget anything except how to sweep and mop and wash dishes."
Nice.
Yeah, I've heard that many, many times since November of 2020. I think, well, we'll reteach you all that good stuff.
Nice try.
Yeah. So we're going to have a homemade ice cream supper on Sunday night.
Oh.
It's been a long time since we've had something like that. Do y'all do things?
No. Send me your recipes, because we've only tried it one time. We have an ice cream maker. We've only tried it one time and it wasn't that great. Yeah. And now I have all these peaches and all the kids are coming over tomorrow, and I wanted to make homemade peach ice cream, but I don't really have a good recipe. Yeah, I have a good one. It might be your ice cream maker did it just not taste good, or did it not freeze up well? No, it froze up. The texture was fine. I just didn't think it tasted that great. And plus, I thought it was a normal size recipe, but it ended up only making a little bitty bit. So, well, we made some this weekend while the kids were here, just because it was fun, and it was just vanilla. But I have a really good Butterfinger homemade ice cream recipe from my Aunt Carlene that I haven't made in years. And actually, when I told Micah yesterday we were going to do this, he said, "You need to make Aunt Carlene's Butterfinger ice cream." And it is really, really good. Yeah, forget the peaches. I want to do that one. Yeah, well, I did buy some peaches for that, but I found some fun little ice cream cups on Amazon. They're like red and blue and green polka dot, just little cups like you see at the yogurt shop, and we're going to set it up outside. I'm sure it's going to be hot, but it's just hot in Texas in July. And we're going to do that after worship on Sunday night. I'm excited. Oh, have some cornhole and some washers, and kids can play on the swing set. And I think it'll be washers? Fun. Well, honestly, I haven't ever really enjoyed it, played it, but there's you dig like holes in the ground and put like a vegetable can that size, you bury it kind of in the ground level so that the opening is still there, but it's level with the ground. And you get the big washers that are about, I don't know, 1.5 inches or 2 inches in diameter, and you have teams that stand on each side and you try to get the washer in the hole. Oh. So it's not anything real exciting to me, but the guys always enjoy it and they get into it. And it's kind of like horseshoes, but it's getting the washer in the hole instead of getting. I've never heard of that one. Yeah, again, maybe it's a Texas thing. Well, that's fun. Yeah. Did you thrift anything? I had the kids all weekend. No, that's true. No. Well, I'm glad I thrifted. You're gonna have to change the question that you ask me every week. So I haven't done so much of that lately. You did so great. You did so great on the front end. Well, maybe when we go back to Colorado, and I won't have as much going on.
So, but Emmy, I was going to tell you too.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No, you.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to tell you that Emmy got a horse.
What?
Emmy was given a horse.
Wow.
Yeah. And somebody said there's no such thing as a free horse, which I'm sure Jordan and Aaron are finding out. But she went down to, I think either Yoakum or Cuero in the area where Aaron was raised, and had lessons at like a little horse camp. And one of the people that was teaching the kids how to ride horses it was one of the horses at the horse camp. And I don't know exactly why they were looking to give the horse, but she wanted to give the horse away to a little girl who had an affinity and an ability. And Emmy, if you know Emmy, she's pretty fearless and she's not afraid, which, you need to have a healthy fear of these huge animals, but at the same time, you've got to be the boss of the animal. And so they've found a place to board the horse, and we've got lots of pictures, got to see her riding the horse, and this little tiny girl on top of this big horse, but he's very gentle, very sweet.
What's the horse's name?
Judd.
Mm-hmm.
And he's in his 20s, so he's not a young horse. He's been around for a while, but Pam, Aaron's mom, had a saddle that Amy can use, and so she's pretty excited about that. That was one of the things we got to see while we were there in Katy.
So when you see pictures of her on the horse, are you completely comfortable with that, or does it make your heart beat a little fast? Or
I just want her to be cautious but not afraid, so it makes me a little bit nervous, I guess, but I try not to let my own fears of big, and I've ridden a few times, not much at all, but I remember how awkward it was for me to, this little girl to be on top. You're 8 feet off the ground, your head is way high off the ground, and if they start trotting, it feels like they're going 90 miles an hour. But anyway, I think it seems like it's kind of
how fun. Yeah.
So what were you going to say?
Well, it's not that exciting now, but I tried homemade root beer.
Really?
Have you ever? Yeah, I didn't make it. One of our members at Lehman Avenue, his name is Jared McGuire. I think I mentioned him on here before because he was one of the guys that helped us chop up the tree that fell down. He's a firefighter, but they have bees and they sell honey, and he does a lot of these kind of homesteady kind of things, but he made homemade root beer, and I've never ever tried anything like it. And it's really, he shared with me the ingredients that were in it, but it's sassafras root bark and sarsaparilla.
What even is that?
Root, I don't know. And licorice root and cherry bark.
So it really is roots.
Yes. Did you know that root beer is because it's got all, and then some of the flavory things are ginger, cinnamon, salt, vanilla, brown sugar, that kind of stuff. But you make all of that into this concentrate, and then you just add your club soda or whatever to it. Okay. And so he gave us some with a can of club soda, and we had it, and it created that nice foam head on it and everything, and it tasted so good. We had it nice and chilled, and actually we had it the week before last, and I meant to share it on here last week because I took pictures of it so I could share it with everybody, and then completely forgot. So I wanted to be sure and mention that. But yeah, I almost feel like I can never have store-bought root beer again. I mean, I will never make this because I don't even know how to get a hold of this stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, where do you find that? And then it's roots. So I'm thinking of dry roots. I guess, do they grind them up into a powder or something and then soak them? Or do you have the recipe, or he just told you what was in it? He
gave me the recipe, and they're dried roots and dried root bark. So I guess you would harvest them, dry them out, and then make maybe a tincture out of them, or simmer them together, to create this flavor profile or something. I'm really not sure. I just printed off
you and I laughing before we started recording about it was during when we were talking about sauerkraut. How in the world did someone come up with this? Let's just simmer this dried root bark and see what comes up with.
I bet it would be a great drink.
Yeah. Like the first person that ate snails must have been pretty hungry.
I always think snails and oysters. Those are the two. Like whoever opened an oyster and saw that thing.
Yeah.
and
Let's
thought,
eat this.
yum.
They were starving. They must have been starving.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, do you
Maybe
have more stuff?
God put that in their mind, that this will be delicious.
Or something, or at least nutritious. Ooh. We've been watching that Alone. I don't know if it's a new season, but it's one we haven't watched. Have you ever watched Alone?
I don't know what that is.
It's a survival series. I can't remember what channel it's on, but it's one of our paid channels like Discovery or something like that. And it starts out with like 10 or 12 people and they drop them off. And this one that we're watching is in Labrador. I even had to look where that is, but it's northern Canada, like north.
That's a dog.
Yeah. Well, I think that dog came from this place, but Labrador is northeastern Canada. So it's way up there and it's like fall. So it's not snowing yet, but that it's coming. So they drop them off in the middle of nowhere and they each have a section of land that's like 5 acres or something like that. And they don't see each other. They don't even know, I think, where each other is. And they have to survive. They each get to pick 20 items that they can bring with them. So you always bring a fire starter, a fishing pole or fishing line. And most of them, you can tell that they have to really think it through. One guy dyed his hair pink so that he could cut his hair off in little bits at a time to make fly fishing, the flies.
That's crazy.
Yeah, because that way he didn't have to actually bring the flies to fish with. He could just make them out of his hair. They can use whatever they find on the land, but everywhere they've been that we've watched it is not, it's not in civilization. So you kind of have to luck onto stuff. But one by one, they either tap out and they have to call and officially tap out, and then someone will come pick them up. I mean, it's like Survivor, but it's not a team thing. It's an individual thing. And a lot of times it's the solitude or it's the isolation that makes them tap out, because can you imagine just being alone? One of them that we watched was 100 days. If you could make it 100 days, and a couple of people could have made it longer than that. It takes a special kind of person that could be by themselves for that long. And
so are they recording it with their own phones, or is there a camera crew out there?
It's just them and their own. It's not their camera phone. They have professional recording equipment that they're provided with by the whatever companies.
So they don't even have the camera crew. Because I always think about that when people do these shows and they're put in this scary situation. I'm like, how come the camera guy's not helping you?
Yeah. No, they are completely alone, and they're recording on their own. And so I'm curious about how they train them to be on alone. As far as a lot of people are already survival experts, but they have to learn to live from the land. They don't get to bring any food. They live off the land. So some people are eating tree bark by day 10, and usually someone gets sick every week on something. But it's just so interesting. I think there's like 9 seasons now, and I think we've watched almost all of them. And usually we watch them in the winter time.
Write that down.
Yeah, Alone. It's just called Alone. And a lot of them start out, they've eaten they said one guy he drank 22 ounces of olive oil every day for like a month to beef himself up, to put fat on, because then they start losing it. And when they start out, it's like I said, it's fall, so they can catch fish, they can go deer hunting, whatever. But by the time it ends, it's always wintertime, and you can't find anything. So I can't remember why I started out to tell that, but it's an interesting.
Because we were talking about root beer.
Yeah, well, maybe they just
whoever saw
necessity.
These things and decided it'd be good to eat. Yeah. Do you think you could do that?
Oh, I know I couldn't.
I couldn't either.
I couldn't last I start sweating when they drop them off and the helicopter flies away and the guy is waving. I mean, there's women and men, but they have to talk. I think there was one thing I was going to say. They have to talk to the camera. And I think you can tell by a few days in, that's like their company themselves,
Wilson!
Yeah, exactly. They're talking to themselves, or they're singing a song, or they're,
oh no.
I would be embarrassed. I'm sure I I think it, like I said, it takes a special kind of person that could do something like that.
Mhm.
Not only do you have to be kind of an introvert, because to be alone for that long, you have to be able to be happy with your own company, but you also have to be able to talk, carry on a conversation, because they're not going to put somebody on the show that can survive, but yet not provide any kind of a monologue or talking or entertainment as they go along. Yeah, because it's entertainment value.
Yeah, I get nervous just when the electricity goes out. So I don't think I would do well.
Yeah. Well, it's always in bear country, and there's always bear encounters and wolverines. And one guy on one season killed a musk ox, like with a knife, one of those huge and then he carried it piece by piece. This is kind of gross, but piece by piece, he carried it back to camp, and it froze, and he was able to eat on it. And I think he may have been the one that won the season. Yeah. None of it's delicious, but then you, of course, you win $500,000. So,
well, I'm embarrassed to say this out loud, but I didn't know a wolverine was a real thing.
It's not just a Marvel Comics character. No, it's a very ferocious animal. Like, it's one of the most dangerous animals, I think, in the world.
Oh.
Now, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but it is. It's a thing.
Yeah.
Well, we are 31 minutes in already.
Oh, so I'm glad you mentioned that.
Chit-chatting.
I'm going to write that down so I can share that when we post
31
this.
minutes. If you want to
skip
seconds.
the chit chat, go to minute 32.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, so our topic today, we're going to talk about caregiving. Someone brought this up as a suggestion to talk about caring for aging parents, because it really affects a lot of us, especially yours and my, our age range, and the sandwich generation, which has become more and more, because the longer we live, we just live longer now. The medicines and things have made it possible for people to live longer. So a lot of times you have children that you're still taking care of, and you're taking care of parents at the same time. But it's not just caring for aging parents. And we're going to talk about taking care of people who are taking care of others, helping caregivers, helping to support caregivers. And it's not just aging parents, but people who take care of others. And if you are not in this situation, you will be at some point, or you should be at some point, because it's a command for us to take care of one another and love one another and honor one another. So I think that we're going to spend this episode talking about different ways that we can take care of one another and help those who are. My experience is with 3 of our 4 parents, and my mom is still alive. And this is what kind of made me a little nervous to cover this topic, because my mom is still alive, and she is not completely dependent, although she's pretty dependent on my brother and his wife. She lived here next, literally within a stone's throw to John and me, with Dad for 20 years. And so we helped care for Dad when he was going through when he was sick. He had dementia, and I hate that. I just hate that word, because it just sounds demented, but it's just, that's what it is. It's dementia, Alzheimer's. And John's parents, who also lived a little further stone's throw, but they lived really close as well. And we were present. John and I were present when my dad died in 2016, and we were present when Grady died in May of 2020, and then when his mom died in October of 2020. And this is one of those things that I think that a lot of people in the world can't understand, that I would not trade anything for that experience. It's not something that you want to go through by any stretch of the imagination, but at the same time, to be able to be there, to be holding their hand, or to just be present when they exit this life, it just is it's hard to explain. It makes you breathless in a way, and your heart pounds, and you realize that you're seeing something that not a lot of people do, and you can't help but lay there or sit there and watch them wonder what they're opening their eyes to. And I remember so vividly, especially when the day that Grady died, that's John's dad, he had lung cancer, and it started, I don't know, 4 or 5, who knows how much earlier it started before he died, but we knew it was coming. And he was so tough. He was such a a tough man. I don't think we realized how sick he was until it got really, really advanced. And the day that he died, he actually shaved that morning, and he was not super, he was feeling terrible. He was feeling bad. He was in his recliner, but he ate a little bit that morning. And I have a picture of Janice sitting there next to him, holding his hand. But we had a hospice bed brought in, like a hospital bed. Hospice was bringing a hospital bed. And we took the table out of the dining room because we wanted him to be in there where everyone could surround him. We knew it was coming. Didn't know it was going to be that day, but I remember we took the table out. We were sweeping. We were cleaning out the windowsills and cleaning the windows so he could look out if he wanted to. And I just remember all of the activity while he laid there in his recliner and waited. And it took me back in such a strange way. It took me back to the days that my babies were born. And, right when birth was approaching, this will make me cry, and I don't want to, but you remember when birth was imminent and how the nurses come in and they're breaking down the bed and they're making covering you with the sheets. And there's just a buzz of activity as the nurses are surrounding you right as your baby is about to make his entrance into the world. And I thought, this is the same thing. We're working on getting things clean and ready for Grady to exit this world. And I thought about the pain that we experience when the babies enter and the pain that we experience as our loved ones exit. But it's a different kind of pain. On one end, you have your whole life ahead of you. And on the other end, you have your whole life ahead of you. If you're a Christian, you have this celebration. And that's how it felt with my dad and with Janice and Grady. It was a celebration because it was a victory. It was sad for us, but it was such a beautiful, beautiful thing just to think that they closed their eyes here in this life and they opened them in the next. And I love that. And so
that is so
taking
beautiful.
taking care of them is an honor. It's an honor, and it's something that God blesses you with the ability to do. And my mother took care of her mother in the nursing home here, but she was there all the time. And my mom got involved with the staff of the nursing home. She knew their names. She took them treats and food, and she loved on them, and she got involved in their lives. She had a Bible quiz that she would do with the residents of the nursing home. She played Bible Jeopardy with them. And but it's one of those things when grandma died, her mother died, it was not within, it was almost immediately that my dad started showing signs of, grandma died of Alzheimer's, and then dad started showing signs. And a little bit more of the personal stuff, and then we can maybe be helpful. But when my mom, at one point, pretty far into dad's dementia, she had some neck surgery to repair some painful issues that she was having. And I was going to take care of dad, stay at the house with dad, and while she was recovering in the hospital. So there was I don't know, 4 or 5 nights, I guess, that she was in the hospital that I was taking care of dad. And I remember dreading it. I just dreaded it because I had all of these, what if he does this? And what if he, because there were times he kept wanting to go home. He wanted to go home all the time. And he didn't realize that he was in his home. But I thought, how am I going to handle that? Because sometimes he would try to pack things in the car. And I wanted so much to preserve his dignity. But there were things that I thought, what if I need to do this for him and he doesn't want me to do that for him? And I have to do it anyway. It's just such a role reversal. And, it was easier for me, I think, than it would have been for a lot of people, because I was within a stone's throw of my own home, and John was there, and he didn't stay. I can't remember if he stayed there at night with me or not, but the point that I'm trying to get at is that I was terrified of what it was going to be like. And I was terrified of how Dad would react and that he wouldn't want me to do things for him. He's the dad and I'm the daughter. But it turned out to be one of the hardest, but one of the most beautiful blessings of my life, because there were things that I was able to do for him and honor him, just being together. And I sat on the back porch and we had ice cream, and he would pat me on the arm and tell me he loved me. And my dad was very dignified and very smart, and he would have hated not being in control of his complete mental faculties, but yet he continued to be a very dignified and but he softened in that period of time. And he said things to me that he didn't necessarily, he told me he loved me all the time, but it was just different. And it was, I saw that God blessed me in that thing that I was terrified to do. He blessed me. And so that is kind of what all of these things swirl in my mind when I think of caring for an aging parent. And now Mom is with Doug, and my sister-in-law Karen does a lot of caretaking for my mom, and I love her so much for doing that for my mom. I know it's not easy because it's not her mom, it's her mother-in-law. And there are things that I'm sure that she would rather I do, and I can't do. Either we're in Colorado or we're over here, and I know that they can honor her by what they do for her as well, and that they are. So I'm thankful that God's blessing them with an opportunity to serve as well. So there were I wrote an article for I don't know if I call it an article, but whatever. I wrote for Christian Woman an article called Still Dad. And so I thought I would talk about some of the things that I wrote in that article, some things that I learned going through that. And I also want to say that my mom has done far, far, far more caretaking than I ever have, and probably ever will. And she has talked about how difficult it was to take care of Dad through those things, but yet at the same time, it made her love Dad more to be able to do those things for him. And I saw that when John was in the hospital. In that brief time, there were hard things that I had to do for him, but it just made me love him more. And isn't that such a biblical thing? God tells us to serve and to honor and to love. And when you do what God says to do, he blesses you, So do you need to interject anything? I don't want to, I'm dominating.
No, I'm just sitting here thinking how grateful I am that you're doing this. And I knew it was going to be very personal for you and probably difficult. I knew there'd be a few tears, but I also have a feeling that this is probably going to be one of our most impactful episodes because you're sharing this. And we already know it's going to touch a lot of hearts because you mentioned somebody had requested this, and really more than one person did. And as we started thinking about having this conversation, I started realizing how many people around me are in a similar situation. It may not be a parent, it may be a grandparent, it may be a spouse, and it may be a child. Anytime you're thrown into a situation where a loved one, their circumstances have changed for some reason or another, and your life changes because of it and because of you taking care of them. There's a lot of instances. So I know that this is going to impact a lot of people, and your story is going to touch a lot of hearts. So I'm grateful for it.
Well, it's humbling on both ends. It's humbling when you are the one that needs the care. And I see this, with my mom, who is, she's aging herself and she can't do the things that she used to do. And she was a visitor. When I was little, she would take me to visit all the little old ladies. And she loved old people. And I say that with a smile. She is one. She are one now, and I'm getting there. But she would take little dishes of stuffed peppers or whatever. She would take them to the little ladies in the nursing home or in the retirement centers, and she would sit and visit, and we would be there. And I just respect her so much for all the caretaking that she's done, that she did for Dad. Part of what I want to talk about is how she had it on her shoulders alone for a long time. That's my first thing that I remember, is that denial. I think I was in denial when I saw it starting with Dad. Little things, he would repeat himself, and I would think, it scared me. And John might bring it up to me. He might say something like, your dad said this right after he said that. And it made me mad. I didn't want to hear it. I just, because I tend to be one of those people that stick my head in the sand. Don't tell me. If I can't think about it, it's not real. It feels like if you voice what's going on, that it makes it more real. But what I realized was that I feel terrible about this, that I made it worse for Mom by denying it, because she was fiercely protective of his dignity too. And she's still this way. She knows we're busy. We're too busy. And she didn't want to intrude on the things that we had going on. And so she had the weight of the world on her shoulders. And I didn't see it, and didn't acknowledge it. I think I saw it in the back of my mind, but I didn't acknowledge it like I should have. So the first thing I would say for people to know in the situation like this is that denial isn't helpful, that we need to open our eyes and look around and see what people are struggling with, and then ask, what are you seeing? What are you seeing that's going? This is what I guess I wish I would have asked Mom. What are you seeing with Dad? Whether or not she would have told me everything, probably not, but she would have told me more had I asked her, what are you seeing going on? And how can we help? And not necessarily just how can we help, but can I do this for you? Or what do you need? And I'll never forget, it was a Sunday morning, and she was still the church secretary, and she was putting the bulletin together. And on Sunday morning, they would work on it until Saturday night, and then they'd usually print it, wait for last minute announcements, whatever. And then they would print it on Sunday morning. And my mom called. This would have probably been 2012, 2013, something like that. And she called on Sunday morning, and she was in tears, and she doesn't cry. She just doesn't cry often. So immediately that was jarring to me. She was crying, and she was trying to get the printer to work, and it wasn't working, and she couldn't get the paper to come out right. And Dad was trying, he was changing clothes again or something. And just the frantic, I felt like a heel. I can't even tell you how awful I felt that it had reduced her to the point of tears, it took a lot for that to happen to her. And there I was 50 yards away. And, Micah was still at home, but Jordan and Jacob were gone. So it would have been easy for me to help her with some of these things. So that was a slap in the face to me, that she would never have intended to be a slap in the face, but she needed my help. And it wasn't that I didn't see it, but I didn't want to see it. And so I ignored some of those signs. And so I would encourage people, don't deny what's going on, what you're seeing. I think a lot of times we are afraid to ask people because it is a dignity issue, especially memory things. And especially when you are someone who has been, I think of Grady. John and I were just talking about this morning. He didn't want help. He was the patriarch, and he could do things, and he didn't want anyone to do the things that he'd been doing. And I think that that's probably in John's future too. And I understand, you've done it. You've been in charge, and you've been capable, and you've handled things, and yet there comes a point when you can't anymore. And so there's that humbling part on both sides. So knowing how to ask and when to ask, I think you pray and you ask God to give you wisdom and give you help and humility, and to be able to approach someone and say, I'm seeing this. Do you need my help? Can I help you take so-and-so to the doctor? Can I help you? Maybe not the person, this is about caregiving. So not the person who's suffering, but the one who's taking care of them. Have you seen stuff like that? Or you know what I'm talking about?
Well, I was just wondering if you had advice for a situation where the loved one definitely does need help, but they're the ones in denial. And you don't want to be a bully about it, and take away their dignity or make them feel inadequate in any way. But what if there's a situation when they actually do need help, and they're just not willing to acknowledge it and accept help and or make changes to let people in to help take care of them.
Well, in some ways that may have been mom. She didn't want to ask for help. And it just came to a point where there was no way around it. She couldn't do it all on her own. And so maybe, I don't know if the answer is just, again, to pray for wisdom, for the right words to approach someone and say, you don't have to say, it looks like your husband or it looks like your wife is going through dementia. Can I help you with that? Or,
Right.
Something that's that blunt, but to say, can we go to lunch or why don't y'all come eat supper with us? And maybe, opening up that relationship will give them the opportunity to admit that there's some struggle going on. I don't know.
Yeah. Good advice.
Well, so denial isn't helpful. That was my first thing that I noted. And then I think it's helpful to remember that memory loss isn't always bad. And I remember taking Dad, and Mom was there too, to the neurologist, and they give you, it's a baseline at the beginning. They give you this little test. They ask you, who's the president? Or what state are we in? Silly things that we think are silly because it's obvious. But if you're struggling with dementia, Alzheimer's, you're not going to know. But, it was heartbreaking to be with Dad when the doctor said, who's the president? And Dad, trying to remember. And the way he looked at me, was embarrassed. It killed me. And I don't know if there's any doctors listening, but the one doctor asked me he asked me in the room with Dad, would you feel comfortable with your child riding with your dad? Oh, no. And that, I hated that. I did not think that was helpful at all, because I had to say in front of my dad and hurt his feelings and say, that was awful. So if you're a doctor, a neurologist, sorry, but I'm just going to say that's not a good thing to do. But what my point that I'm trying to get at is that memory loss isn't all bad, because that was embarrassing for Dad. But by the time we got to the lobby, he'd forgotten about it. He didn't remember the doctor asking him that question.
Yeah.
He didn't know that anything was wrong. And I've told people before that the problem was that he didn't know anything was wrong. But the good thing was that he didn't know anything was wrong.
Kind of protected him.
Yeah. It was like a little bubble that he was in. And it's harder for the people taking care of those who don't remember things than it is. Although I'm sure there's a lot of frustration going on in the minds of people suffering. So memory loss isn't all bad. I also remember being able to ask Dad repeatedly within the same visit, like, tell me about playing baseball in that empty lot on Yerington Avenue or wherever it was in Fort Worth. And he loved talking about old times like that. And then an hour later, I could ask him the same thing, and he would love talking about it again. So it's not like he had forgotten that he talked about it. So that wasn't a bad thing. Memory, the memory loss wasn't necessarily a bad thing. So try to find some good things about it. And other of the things that I've thought about is how we need to just be very, very intentional about creating happy memories for our children. And you and I are beyond this. Hopefully we did that. I know that we tried to, and I know that we did. But because the long-term memory is what lasts. And, I know I'm honing in on Alzheimer's, and there are a lot of other caregiving incidents, but I think this is also applicable to people who are not necessarily suffering from memory loss. But those, if people who have Alzheimer's, they can't remember what they did 5 minutes ago, but they can remember what they did when they were 5. And my dad could remember all of those good times playing baseball with his buddies. All I would have to do to bring a smile to his face would pull down his old high school annual, and we would flip through the pages, and he would point out people. He'd talk about Vincent or Alderman, these old guys that were his buddies, and he would smile, and that brought him joy. So, and I think looking back at pictures of his vacations, my Meemaw and Boompah, his parents took them on vacations every year, which, in the 40s was probably not a real routine thing. Vacations were probably quite a luxury, but they drove to New York from Fort Worth
Oh,
in
wow.
places like that. But Dad, he loved having those memories. And I was always so thankful that he had such good, happy childhood memories, because when you don't have the short-term memory, you do have that long-term.
Mm.
And so it made me think we really need to focus on, not necessarily thinking down the road, I'm creating this happy memory now because my child is going to have Alzheimer's later. God willing, there'll be a cure for it by the time our kids are at that age. But
Right.
creating happy memories for our children, I think, could be helpful later. Another thing that I thought of is, if someone has influenced you or done something wonderful for you, or you love them, tell them now and show them appreciation now. And I thought about my parents' 50th anniversary was in 2013. That was their 50th. And we had a big 50th anniversary bash. And I asked for people to send us cards, send cards to our address. And we put together memories, and we put together this great big book of memories for them. And so 2013, he was starting down that road, but he died in 2016. So that was 3 years from then. And he loved looking through, but when people voiced their appreciation for all of the good things that Mom and Dad did for them over the years, they spent years with college students and had a great impact on so many people. And he was able to read those and enjoy those before he really lost all of his memory. So tell people now before they have issues with memory loss. And jump in anytime you have anything you want to say, please.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought also that this is the big one. The caregiver needs more help and attention than the patient does. And that's kind of what we're trying to focus in on today. There was things that I thought about with Mom, and I know she's going to listen to this, and I'll let her know ahead of time what it's going to be about. But one of the things that just broke my heart was realizing that at some point she had the last conversation with Dad that made sense, and she didn't know it. It's like when you are a mother and you have picked up your child and carried them for the very last time, and you don't know it. There was that one last time. And I think there's that one last conversation that she had with Dad. And obviously it wasn't just a cliff that he went over. It was a gradual decline, but it broke my heart when I thought about that. And I know when I'm upset, when I cry to John. I go to him and I cry on his shoulder, and he's the one that comforts me. But in this situation, Mom couldn't cry to Dad about Dad, because how would he feel if he knew that he was the source of her tears,
Right. Yeah.
So it was so sad for me to think about those things for Mom. And at the time going through this, Dad did not want Mom out of his sight. That was his link to reality, I guess. There were things that she would say that when you live with someone who is not in this reality, it starts making you question your own sanity. And you question your own reality. And so thinking about Mom going through this, and she's, like I said earlier, she is the one that really needed my help more than Dad did. And so I think we have to be aware of that and go through it, be with them and walk through this valley with them, and bear sadness with them and cry with them, because that's what they need. So the caregiver needs more help and attention than the patient. Cognitive disorders create a role reversal. And I don't think it's necessarily just a cognitive disorder, because anytime there's some type of whatever the issues that go along with aging, it creates a necessity for the child to take over something that the parent previously did. And that's tough. And I can already, like I was mentioning a little while ago, that Grady didn't want John and Tommy to do things that he previously did. But I think, again, that God has given us the opportunity to be a blessing to our parents or whoever we're taking care of. And he's also given the parent the blessing to allow the child to do them the honor of caring for them. There's a song that's called Blessings by a woman named Laura Story. And among the lyrics she says, what if the blessings come through raindrops? What if your healing comes through tears? What if 1,000 sleepless nights is what it takes to know you're near? And then towards the end of the song, she says, what if the trials of this life, the rain, the storms, the hardest nights are your mercies in disguise? And every time I hear that song, I just get the biggest lump in my throat, because I think every hard thing, and I've not been through a lot of hard things in my life, but every hard thing that I have ever been through has resulted in more blessings than I can count. And I know that there are a lot of people out there that would say, that have experienced more, that would say the same thing. If you look for it, you will find that God has blessed you through those trials. And then it's biblical, God has told us that he'll bless us when we do the right thing. And when we endure trials, it just makes us stronger on the other side. So that's kind of the main thing about taking care of an aging parent. And again, I just want to say that my mom did far more of that. And now she's the one being cared for. And I don't care for her as much as I should. She's further away from me than she used to be. And she's done everything for me. And it's a blessing and an honor to be able to do anything for her, because she deserves it.
Well, she was an example for you. You got to see all the caregiving and you were able to learn from that. And I've been thinking as we're listening, I said that this was going to be so helpful and so impactful, because you're doing the same thing for me. You're doing the same thing for others who are listening in, or just who know you in real life and are watching you in real life as a caregiver to those that God put in your, sphere, and the people that are dear to you. And I was thinking that I've not been in that situation yet, really. My mom had a stroke several years ago and needed to come live with us for 3.5 years. And that involved hospital stays, taking her to the lab every other day. I had to put shots in her stomach, which was nerve-wracking. And just little things like that. I was thinking about some of the challenges that we'll probably talk about here in a little bit, but one of them is just doing things you've never had to do before and don't have any experience with. And I remember when I found out I had to give her shots in her stomach, I was terrified and had never done anything like that. And I used the little alcohol and then, put the shot in, and she just kind of caught her breath a little bit. And then afterwards she smiled and she was like, next time, can you let that alcohol dry off before you put the shot in there? And I was like, oh,
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, just little things like that you don't know, and but that was just very brief, and Mom was on her feet and on her own before long. So like I said, I've really not experienced that, but I feel that I've been very blessed to have several dear people in my life that have done that or are currently taking care of a loved one as a caregiver. And we can learn so much from that and kind of take notes for when it's our turn. And I wanted to kind of give a shout out to some of those, if you don't mind. The first person that comes to my mind is Cheryl Turner. And her mother-in-law came to live with them. Her father-in-law died suddenly, and they went to the funeral and ended up bringing back her mother-in-law from that. So just like overnight, her whole world changed. And at the time, we were meeting at the gym every morning to walk on the treadmill. So I feel like I had a really good look into what her life was like, because she would talk about it, and I saw it changed her schedule, how she cooked, just so many things. But I know, watching her go through all of that, even though it presented its own challenges, that she's able to look back on that and feel good about how she handled it. She's not going to have any regrets. She took such good care of her mother-in-law. And so I feel like I'm just mentally taking notes, and I thought of some of our members here at Lehman Avenue, Kelly Nix and Lee Wheat, their sisters. They just lost their mother, and it was kind of this long decline, and they were really good about taking care of her, and also kind of inserted some humor, not at their mom's expense, never at their mom's expense, but almost at themselves and what they were going through or taking care of. And as hard as it was, and as heartbreaking as it was, they would still share some little thing that would make people smile, just a little bit of humor and maintaining joy through all of that.
It's an attitude, isn't it?
Yes, it was a really
attitude.
Beautiful, intentional is a good word for it. And then here's another situation people might be in. Excuse me, Cherie Mabry. She is our daughter-in-law Janelle's mom, and her mother is in poor health, but they have since moved. And so Cherie's sister really has the full-time care, but she has made an intentional decision to go out there often and stay for 2 weeks at a time to give her sister a break.
Yeah.
And, and she's being such a good daughter through this and disrupting her own schedule to go out there and care for her. Another situation that might be a little different is I think of Jeremy Waddell and Cassie Adkins, their brother and sister here, and they help take care of their grandparents. So it's not aging parents, but an aging grandparents. And they're real good about going to visit. And while they're there, they just do some things that they might need help with, that might be uncomfortable, but they do them because they love them. And, so just so many. We have a gentleman here, Bobby Gilbert. His wife battled cancer for a couple of years, and he never wanted to have to put her somewhere. And so he was her full-time caregiver. And, so many beautiful examples all around us that we can learn from. And I was thinking about, even though I haven't experienced it myself, I was able to see some of the challenges that came up and some of the things that I thought of, you've kind of touched on, but there can be a time commitment that changes. You get in a groove, you've got your own schedule, you've got your own life, and then all of a sudden, everything has to shift and work itself around this new role as caregiver. And sometimes, as you mentioned, it can be 24/7 if that person doesn't want you to leave their side or needs constant care. Learning new skills, as I already alluded to, like what if you have to administer shots or learn things about medicine and dosage and dietary interactions with medicines? You may be called upon to do some unpleasant tasks that you have never done before. Physical things, watching your loved one change mentally or decline physically or experience pain. All of those are hard on the caregiver. Obviously, they're hard on the one suffering, but they're hard on the caregiver as well. Exhaustion, think of those middle of the night disruptions, or just the exhaustion that comes from the burden of concern, or caring for somebody, physical exertion, worry. In the particular case of Kelly, and I know she listens to our podcast, but they had for a while there, they had their mom on their phone. Like they could pull up the camera at any time and check on her. And sometimes they'd get that notification in the middle of the night, that she's fallen or, and they'd have to go check on her. But so worry, sleep disruption, balancing taking care of their needs while keeping up with your own life and responsibilities. You mentioned sometimes you could still have kids in your home that you're taking care of when this responsibility comes up. So there's a lot of different things that can be challenges in a situation like that.
One of the things too that I'm thinking when talking is that often in a situation like this, we are seeing the patient who does not feel well and they're not at their best and they're cranky because there's all of these changes that have happened in their lives, and someone who's been maybe in charge or has been able to be the one that has been providing care or could plan your own meals, could run to the grocery store. And I think, mom, in a lot of ways, she's lost her independence and she doesn't have a car anymore. We laugh sometimes because she says, I wish I hadn't sold my car. And I say, even if you hadn't, you do not have any business driving a car. She can't see very well. We tease her about that. But sometimes, honestly, it's a little frustrating because she wants to do things that she can't do, and she knows she can't do them. And it's hard for her, which makes it hard for us. And so it's just frustrating all around. It's frustrating to her, frustrating to us. And, when you're not at your best, you usually don't act your best, both sides, whether caregiver or care receiver. And so praying about having grace in the words that we say, praying that we will have compassion and remember just exactly, where they are right now, and thinking of the things that have changed for that person, and putting yourself in that spot. When I put myself in the position of thinking, I can't right now, if I want to go to the grocery store, I get in the truck and go, and I get what I need, and I go home, and I get out of the truck myself, and I walk into the house, and it's just watching my mom go through some things has made me more grateful for my own ability to just get around easily. I don't take that for granted anymore. I used to.
That's a good point, because some of my most frustrating moments is when I feel like I've lost control. And I don't have control of a situation. I don't have control of the variables. I can't do anything about it. So imagine that being your new life, where you no longer have control of something as simple as getting in the car and driving somewhere when you want to.
Right. And we talk about growing old gracefully.
Yeah.
Are we, as you and I grow older, will we be able to do it gracefully? But will we extend grace to the ones around us who are growing older? And that's the thing that I kept coming back to in my notes when I was thinking about this. Was the number one word was respect, and having respect for the person that we are taking care of. Of course, Matthew 15 talks about being, and I know you've written that down, we're to honor our father and mother. And he's quoting Old Testament passages in Exodus and Deuteronomy. But the one that I thought about a lot was Leviticus 19:32. You shall rise up before the gray-headed and honor the aged. You shall revere your God. So, putting those two next to each other, honoring the aged and revering God at the same time. Stand up, stand up in honor. Literally, you can stand up and give someone that's older than you your seat. And you don't see as much of that as you used to. Honor the person that has gray hair. Why do they have gray hair? Because they're older, because they have life experience, and because they know what they're doing and what they're talking about. And then Proverbs 23:22, listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old. Read that again. Listen to your father who gave you life. He gave me life. Do not despise your mother when she is old. It's sobering, the responsibility that God gave us to honor our parents in their older years. And what does that look like? And I guess that's kind of what we're talking about. What does it look like to respect and to honor and to revere your parents when it's maybe not so easy anymore? Because it is frustrating sometimes. But your mama changed your diapers. And I think too, I've thought this a lot of times, how I feel about my kids is how my mom feels about me. My sons are, you can't even put into words how you love them and how you think about them and how you, in some ways, almost obsess over things in their lives, especially while you're raising them, because you're trying to mold and shape them into the men, and of course for women too, that God wants them to be. But then they get older, and like you said, we've lost control. Don't really want control necessarily, but you still think about them all day, every day. You think about what they're doing and what's going on. And so I know that my mom thinks the same about me, and it makes me pause and be thankful for her and all of the things that she did for me and my dad too. Although I don't have any doubt that he changed my diaper far fewer times than my mom did. Are we being boorish talking about diapers?
No.
So, go ahead.
James 1:27 talks about pure religion involving taking care of visiting the widows in their affliction. And The word visit there means to go see a person with helpful intent, to look after and bestowing care in their distress.
Yeah.
And then in Mark 7:9-13 was an instance where Jesus was accusing the Pharisees of being hypocrites. And in this case, they were neglecting to take care of their parents. And they were saying, here, I would give this to them, except that I've already promised it to God, and so the wording is they were setting aside the commandment of God because they claimed they didn't even have anything left for their parents. And Jesus said they were ignoring the command to honor their father and mother. Mm-hmm. And then as far as scriptures go, 1 Timothy 5:16, if any believing woman has relatives who are widows, let her care for them. Mm-hmm. So you've already mentioned the ones that I had down too, but Old Testament and New Testament, this idea of honoring our parents goes beyond, just having a good attitude toward them. It does involve taking care of their physical needs, seeing to whatever they might need help with when they can't do it for themselves anymore.
And I can't stress enough how it's not just an obligation and a responsibility, even though it is, it's a blessing.
Right.
And that saying, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, is so true here, because we can see something as a drudgery or as, I've got to go do this, or I need to whatever. But when we turn it around and have a better attitude about it and remember, that this is a woman or this is a man that gave me life, that shuttled me back and forth to school, that taught me the love of God, that showed me the love of God, that introduced me to my spouse, all of the things. You look back at your childhood, and of course there are times that we butted heads with our parents, and we still do, but especially in a Christian home, we just really need to remember the things that our parents blessed us with and what they did, and it helps us to be more cheerful about honoring them, and remember that it's not a responsibility or an obligation, but a blessing, because it really is true that when we look at it differently, it becomes a different, it feels different.
Well, I was thinking about the practicing the golden rule, treat other people the way you want them to treat you. In this case, it would be treat other people the way you want your future grown children to treat you if you're in that situation.
It really does make you think,
Yes.
It really does make you think.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the blessings, because in thinking about encouragement for caregivers, I had that recognize the blessings, and I was thinking about just any situation when you find yourself giving to others, it always comes back tenfold. When you think you're sacrificing or, kind of pat yourself on the back for this offering that you're doing, or small kind, it always comes back. It always comes back to you. And what greater way to give than caring for a loved one? So giving so completely of yourself, the blessings are going to come back, like Acts 20:35. It's more blessed to give than it is to receive. And another blessing that I thought of was that complete dependence on God. It's not just your loved one is depending on you, but now you're depending on God also to help you through that with all the things you mentioned, with grace, with wisdom, with helping them with their dignity. We're relying on God to help us through that. And then I thought about that spiritual sweetness or tenderness. And as you were talking in the beginning and you were sharing your story, I saw that all over your face. And you've gained that because of what you've experienced. You've gained that tenderness and that heart and that story and that love because of the blessing of going through that with your loved ones and going through it firsthand for yourself in a way that I don't have yet. And so that's a blessing, that spiritual tenderness, and you now have that empathy for others in that situation. Somebody quoted, well, the person who said this is Tia Walker, but I think she was actually quoting somebody else, so I'm not sure. But she said, caregiving often calls us to lean into love we didn't know possible. And I felt like I was seeing that on your face, you know,
Mm.
just that extra level of sweetness and tenderness that came from that. And another blessing was empathy for others because of that. Greater appreciation for the challenges of the elderly.
Mhm.
You know, you're kind of experiencing it firsthand, and it maybe it's a little hits you a little bit differently when it's somebody that you love,
Yeah.
and you saw them in their stronger days.
Mhm.
Um, it's an honor to be used by God in such a way. You know, you're the one that gets to do that for that
Yeah.
person, and
Mhm.
God's using you to be His hands in that situation.
Well, just saying it that way, I get to be the one to do this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's true. And you're complimenting me saying you saw that on my face. It's something that stays with you, but it's something that you have to continue to remind yourself to do, because I know, mom needs more of my attention, and I need to be more intentional about um, honoring her, because it's just, we get so busy doing things. And one of the things that I remember when she had that neck surgery, and
Mm-hmm.
then dad, he was still going through things. They needed me to be there with them at the house, and not to be busy at the house, but to just be, and to sit with them and to walk with them in the middle of all that. And it's so tempting when we're so used to devices, and
Mm-hmm. Or
we just,
multitasking, you know, you want to,
yes.
I'll sit with you, but I need to be accomplishing something while I'm doing it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And it's really, really a struggle for me to sit still. And I think, wasn't it Neil was talking about, he spoke on um the discipline of stillness or something. I remember him
Mm-hmm.
saying that he had spoken recently on that. And I was wanting to go back and think about that, because it really is a discipline that I
Mm-hmm.
don't have, just being still. And uh anyway, that may be a topic for another day.
Be in the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Be in the moment. Exactly. And just sit and chat, and not be looking at your phone or working on your laptop, but sit there and reminisce. And, like you were talking about, sitting at the table with your grandma and snapping beans. I think that my mom would enjoy not snapping beans necessarily, but for me to sit at the table. A lot of times I'll go there and I'll take her out, because she doesn't get out a whole lot. And so we'll go eat lunch, and we'll go get a haircut, or we'll go to HEB or somewhere like that. And I know she enjoys that, but there's times that I know that she would enjoy more just for us to sit in her house and just chat. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I'm making a notation, mom, we'll do that next week.
Well,
Okay.
it requires a level of patience, I imagine, you know, and we're so time conscious, you know,
Mhm.
and schedule oriented, and always mindful of that, to just force yourself to be still and be in the moment without thinking, okay, I'm gonna give you 15 minutes and then I've got a blah blah blah.
And then the whole time you're watching your
Looking
watch.
at your, yeah, checking your phone. Yeah.
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 And
I was
that's,
looking at the with giving back and showing gratitude for your loved ones, as you've already talked about, 1 Timothy 5:4, words it, make some return to your parents.
mm,
And I kind of love how that's worded. It's like some return. It's not that you're repaying in full.
what verse is that?
1 Timothy 5:4. Now I need to check which version that was, because I had about 3 different versions when I was looking at these verses. But it's like, make some return. You know, this
Make
is
some
this
return.
is some small way that you have to give back and show a little gratitude.
I have a footnote that says give back recompenses.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
didn't even think about that.
and so to care for those who once cared for us is one of the highest honors. Is another
Yeah.
little quote that I came across. But those are some of the maybe hidden blessings that we might not think about, that I was thinking of in light of the people that I've known, you being one of them, you know, that might come from being a caregiver. But
I want to go
what
back
other,
to Acts 20. You brought it up, and John also
yeah,
pointed, when I was chatting with him this morning a little bit, he brought that up to me, and the context of this. You remember that Paul's with the Ephesian elders, and he called them to him before he's about to get on the ship, and they right after he said what you quoted in verse 35. This is when they began to weep aloud, and they just wrapped their arms around him, and they're weeping because they don't think they'll see him again. But he says, this is the last thing that he says to them, at least is recorded. The last thing he says to those Ephesian elders, in everything I showed you, that by working hard in this manner, you must help the weak. And remember the words of the Lord Jesus that he said, it's more blessed to give than receive, which this is what John pointed out. He said, we don't have any record of where he said that. So you think about all the many things that Jesus said that we don't have a record of, all the wisdom that he had, but help the weak. This is the last thing that Paul told them, help the weak. And remember that Jesus said it's more blessed to give than receive. But who are the weak? A lot of times we think about maybe we're helping the homeless or we're helping, who is the church helping? But who more and who better to help that are weak than those that we love that are struggling in their later years or who are struggling through a sickness. But it just really, I had not noticed that before, that the very last thing that Paul said was to help the weak and to remember how blessed it is to give and than it is to receive. So I'm glad you brought that out.
That's good. I thought of something similar with Matthew 25 when Jesus was talking about, as much as you've done it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me. And he's think about the very specific things that he's talking about is when somebody's hungry and you give them something to eat. When somebody's thirsty, you're going to give them something to drink. When somebody is needing to be clothed, you're the one that clothes them. When somebody's sick, you're the one taking care of them. And like you said, I think sometimes that can be a passage when we think of that as a nameless stranger out there that, our contribution goes toward, or our donations or our church programs or, whatever it might be, when the very specific things he mentioned might be somebody right in front of us that needs those basics. And Jesus says, when you're doing that for them, you're doing it for me. So that would be another encouragement that I would give for caregivers, is that God sees.
Yeah.
And God sees your sacrifice and the time that you're putting into it. Maybe there are times when you feel like this has been going on for a while and you feel lonely, or, God sees every little bit of it. And Jesus said that you're doing that for him.
Yeah. And not to insert, well, maybe it is to insert a little negativity here. God also sees when we don't do it, and he knows that this is a blessing that he's put in front of us that we're not taking advantage of. He knows that that there is a need that we're not providing for. And that's a scary thought. And why is it that it's true that it's easier for us to be patient with someone that's not family, or to have more compassion on someone who is, or to show more respect to someone that is not our mother or our father? Maybe it's just because our mother or father have raised us to be respectful and kind to people, that we encounter. But I just have wondered before, why is it so hard sometimes to be as respectful and compassionate and kind to those that we love the most in this world than for complete strangers? And it just doesn't make sense, but I've seen it in my own life, and I've seen it in others. So God knows when we're not doing what we need to do. He knows when we're not acting like we need to act.
And along those same lines, why is it so much easier to acknowledge when someone else has a bad attitude about it?
Yeah.
You might hear them griping or saying things and you're like, wow, can't you be a little more respectful? Can't you be a little more patient with them? Can't you be a little more thought? Do you have to embarrass them? It's just how easy it is for us to call something out and some other family dynamic instead of seeing it in our own heart and our own negligence or bad attitude or
and we
whatever
just
it
make
might
ourselves look terrible when we gripe about that.
Yeah. But I mentioned earlier that you can look around you and see these great, role models that you can learn from, but you can probably also look around you and see some that you think, I hope I will never be that way.
Yeah.
Hope I'll never treat them that way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just heartbreaking to see it sometimes. Well, I had a few suggestions for caregivers that I can run through real quick. And I know you have said some already, and I know you've got more. One of them is for us to be more conscious of older people in our congregations, in our area, maybe neighbors who don't have children that live nearby or grandchildren that live nearby. that might need our help. And I think about things like they might need help adjusting their thermostat. My mom always struggled with that. And, when they've got these newfangled thermostats, used to you turn the dial to the temperature that you wanted. Now you have to push this and scroll that. And so maybe they might need help with things around the house and their kids. There's this gap. I've said this before. There is a huge gap between where you hear someone saying, we might have to put mom in a nursing home. And there are times you have to do that. And you're not dishonoring your parent when you have to do that. Sometimes you don't have to, other times you do. But there's a huge gap between thinking about it and doing it. And there's an enormous mountain of things that happens in that gap that I have seen firsthand. And so, wow, pray for those people. When you hear someone saying something like that, that's probably not your first clue, but that is a huge clue that you can say, okay, I need to help. I need to do what I can to ease your burden. And what am I going to do? Asking ourselves, what am I going to do to help in this situation? But anyway, be more conscious of older people who don't have children or family close by, their car battery, their tires. Can I run and get your prescription for you? Can I get anything from the grocery store for you? Can I take you to the grocery store? Would you like to go? I laugh with mom about, I'm telling her, pretty soon you're going to have to get one of those carts that you drive, but she can still push and she likes to go because it's part of, I think she enjoys going because that's part of before, and it's part of routine life, and it kind of helps her be back in reality, that you feel like it's like when you've been sick, maybe you've been out of commission for a week or so and you get back out and it's like, oh, the world kept going without me. Going back to school after you've been sick, remember that weird feeling like, oh, there's things I've missed. And it takes you a while to adjust back into reality.
It makes me wonder if when you go make a visit to shut-ins or something, you usually take muffins. Maybe you should take a little tool bag instead and say, is there anything here I can, can I tighten your faucet for you while I'm here?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I'm going to put a little tool bag in my car. And again, we've already mentioned this, but sit still with them and be there and pay attention. That's the thing you were talking about, not being on a device, because if you're on a device, you're not paying attention. And they just need our attention. They need to feel valued and to feel heard, just like you and I do. So
look them in the eye, say their name.
Yeah. Another one, especially this is related to dementia. And I've heard people talk many times about this. When at the beginning, especially, you try to convince them, no, like with Dad, I need to go home, and saying you are home. It didn't help. And we try. And I think a lot of people feel like they're lying when they say things that they're not true. But what I kept telling myself with Dad is that he is not coming back to my reality, but I can go to his. So if he is saying, I need to go home, and Mom would do this sometimes, we would just say, okay, tomorrow, we'll go home tomorrow. And that would put his mind at ease. And just seeing the look on his face when he was saying, I need to go home, the frustration and he felt like he was in someone else's house. And so you can imagine how that felt to him, to think that he's intruding on. He would say, well, what if they wake up? There's just things going on. And it's not helpful to anyone to say, Dad, you are home. There's no one here. You're fine. We're not going anywhere. And so just realizing that you go to their reality is not deceptive. It's just comforting them because there's nothing you can do about it. And I'm trying to think of other situations.
You don't really need to argue with them or correct them or say, we already did that, remember?
Right. Yeah. No, you just do what you can to comfort them. I've seen different nursing homes or memory care places that they play the music, 40s and 50s music. And there's something about music, you and I've talked about this, from your era that just is calming. And so they decorate the place in the decor from the 50s or whatever. It may be different now, but so go to their reality and don't expect them to come back to ours. And it's sad, it's hard, but it's a weight that's lifted when you realize you don't have to correct them. You don't have to keep disagreeing and arguing with them. It's just not going to help. Realize again that time just goes so slowly for the homebound. I've heard mom say this lots of times, how she'll say Saturday was such a long day. And I think Saturday was a day that went by in a flash for me, but I'm in such a different place in life than she is. And so they need our visits. They need us to check in on them. And the whole time I'm writing all this, I'm feeling guilty because of the things that I need to do better with her. But I think that I should have said this first, that we need to pray before we go, pray before we visit, pray before we talk to them. There's specific things to ask for, ask for wisdom. Obviously, we ask for wisdom, God gives it to us, but ask for patience, ask for a cheerful heart, ask for perspective, to remember that God will help you have a perspective and remember where they are in life and where you are in life and how you can bless them and how you can make a difference in their life. Ask for mercy, a merciful attitude rather than a cranky, unforgiving, just put upon, ask God to help you when you go to minister and to help someone that needs our help. Ask for compassion. So I think also about being their advocate. Mm-hmm. And this was something that I kind of realized when John was in the hospital, when he was not conscious, and there were things that I knew he needed. And I tend to be the kind of person that I don't want to bother someone. Mm-hmm. This is really stupid because the nurses were there for him. But it took a lot for the first couple of hours for me to go out to get them and say, he needs this. But then I thought to myself, if it was me in this bed, he would be all over them, telling them she needs this. She needs you to do that. She needs, and I thought, he needs me to be his advocate and I'm going to do it. And I did it. It taught me that people who need care need someone to advocate for them. So whether it's, maybe somebody's not unconscious, but you have a perspective of what's going on in their life, you need to be out in front of them and say, this is what she's got going on. And we need you to do this for her. Would you please do this for her? My cousin Jana my aunt lives close by, our aunt, not her mother, because she's still very capable, but my Aunt Jean now lives close to my cousin Jana. And she's such an advocate for my Aunt Jean and letting people know what she does and doesn't need. And would you please send some pictures to her? Would you write her a letter? She needs this. And I just respect my cousin for doing what she does for my Aunt Jean. So those were a few suggestions.
Yeah, that's really good, really practical. I don't really have suggestions. I was just thinking of something that might be encouraging for caregivers. And God sees your sacrifice and remember the blessings. And then I also had to call on his strength. And I was thinking, there's so many verses in the Bible about when we feel like we're just flat out of strength, we can't do it on our own anymore, we're exhausted. How many verses, be strong in the Lord, Ephesians 6:10, he is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or imagine, Ephesians 3:20. So maybe a Bible marking on the topic of strength in God, so that when we do feel so depleted, we can turn to those and take those passages into our heart. And one of my favorite verses I felt like fits so good for the caregiver, and it's the Isaiah 58 verses 10 and 11. If you extend your soul to the hungry and satisfy the afflicted soul, then your light shall dawn in the darkness, and your darkness shall be as the noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your soul in drought and strengthen your bones. You shall be like a watered garden and like a spring of water whose waters do not fail.
Wow, that's beautiful. Isaiah 58, what?
10 and 11.
That needs to be framed. put on the bathroom mirror. Well, it's a beautiful passage.
And then another encouragement is, well, this might be advice, to lean on God's family. And, you mentioned that you don't like to bother somebody. And I can think of somebody now who has gone through long-term caring, but they never wanted to share it with anybody. They never wanted to talk about it or bring anybody in, because they just didn't want to burden anybody. But they also really suffered, they really struggled. And I'm not reprimanding a person in that situation. I'm just saying that sometimes letting other people in, while it may be hard at first, can be a huge blessing. And I think that's why God gave us our Christian family. And it can be a delicate situation if you're trying to protect somebody's dignity, or if you might have a loved one that needs the care, but they're not comfortable with anybody else coming in. Right. There have been times when, you might say to somebody, I packed an overnight bag. I'm going to come spend the night with your mom so that you can go home. And, and they'll be like, well, she really just isn't comfortable with other people staying with her. So sometimes that can be the situation, but you can share your burdens for sure. Galatians 6:2, we're to bear one another's burdens, have coffee with someone who's been in your shoes, and maybe just know that you're not alone, or get some encouragement, or ask for prayers. There are still things that you can do to lean on the family that God's given us. Look for ways to fill your own cup. We kind of talked about that a little bit last time, and needing to take care of our own selves physically, emotionally, spiritually, so that we can continue to care for others. So that might be in the form of finding a good podcast, or reading devotional books, or even writing about your experiences, which is what you've done. Drinking God's word, compliment somebody else. We've talked about that before. Sometimes it helps just to kind of take your mind off of your own situation by thinking about somebody else. So look for ways to fill your cup, and then recognize the blessings, which we've already talked about.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, finish out.
Well, I found this. I found this site that I think it was called Caring Heart or something like that, but it is specifically for caregivers. And a lot of people, there was this one thread where a lot of people were just giving practical advice, or sharing quotes or things that have encouraged them in their own. So this is from the people who are literally in the trenches right now. Yeah. And some of the things that they said, I thought was so good. And I think one of my favorites was, somebody said, be in the moment with them. They may not remember you were there, but you will.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really good. Somebody else said, make every visit a celebration, not a sad check-in.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
When caring for my mother became stressful, I would remember how much harder it was for her than it was for me.
Yeah. Along those lines, I remember Mom brought this up, but I've heard other people say it too, that someone questioned a husband who was visiting his wife in the nursing home who had Alzheimer's. And they said, why do you go every day? She doesn't even know you're there. And he said, I know she's there. And I know what they said, she doesn't know you anymore. And he said, I know her. And that's certainly an honor, we need to give to one another.
Somebody else said compassion, not reaction.
That's great too. Because it's so easy to react rather than to be proactive. We react, and that's again praying for compassion before we visit, before we do something for someone, to pray to. That's so important. Every time I do that, and then why am I surprised when God gives me what I ask for? And then why am I surprised if I forget to pray before I do something and it just goes wrong? There's been so many instances when I've prayed beforehand, and then I was just so thankful that I had. There's a few things that I came across, how to support caregivers, kind of along the lines of what you were saying. One, there's like 10 of them. I'm just going to give a couple. One is make sure they're eating, So maybe you need to take a meal to the caregiver, not to the care receiver.
Good idea.
Be specific in how you ask, not something like, let me know how I can help. When we all say that, we all mean it. I don't think we shouldn't say it, but what if we said, can I come clean your bathroom? Can I, I'm a person that I don't necessarily really want someone coming in my house and cleaning my bathroom. It's embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be the one, if we ever have someone to come clean the house, I'm going to clean it up before they come.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
So I think it is important to ask permission, not to just barge in, although some people don't mind it, but know who you're talking to. Go with them to a support group. Don't just say, here's a support group, but offer to go with them, and then go with them to a support group. Another one that I thought was important, we ask caregivers to come go to dinner. If they say no, they can't, don't quit asking, keep asking, because it's important for them to stay in contact, and tell them how much you appreciate what they're doing for this other person, even if it's not one of your loved ones. If it's something you notice them doing a good thing, tell them. So I thought those were some good things. There's a woman that I've gotten to know a little bit on Facebook. Her name is Kay Jacoby. I don't know if I'm saying her last name right. It might be Jacoby, but she messaged me. I wrote some of her information down if I can find it, but she messaged me when John was going through his stuff, and not in order to tell me her story, but she, in passing at one point, mentioned that I think it was like 14, 15 years ago, her husband was 56 years old and died in his sleep. And it was a very kind of a similar situation to John's, except that he was asleep when it happened and didn't wake up, and he didn't survive. And I've so many times thought that if it had been a couple of hours earlier for John, the same thing would have happened to him. But she told me how much she prayed for him and how much she prayed for me, and that he would survive. But my point in bringing her up is that she, in the midst of all this going on with us, was telling me that she was taking care of a friend of hers who had ALS. And she was there like 18 to 20 hours a day. And I don't know how in the world you do something like that. But she said that her friend had children, but they didn't take care of her. So she did. And one of the things that she said, that, you come across names on Facebook, and you recognize the name, but you don't know them. But just giving me a little snippet, she said, I thank God so much for the blessing of being able to take care of, I think her name was Kayleen, the woman that she took care of. And to say that she thanked God for the blessing to take care of someone who was completely incapacitated, that's humbling to know someone that has such a good heart like that. So there's a lot that people go through in taking care of loved ones, whether it's your parent or your grandparent, or just taking care of someone. People are professional caregivers, that we have people that we appreciate so much that have helped. There's one that helps with Mom, and Destiny, that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, that helped with Janice. And it's funny when I think about it, Janice didn't want anyone coming in. She didn't want that, but yet look what ended up happening. So there's a lot of prayer that needs to go into this. There's a lot of attitude checking, heart checking that we need to do before we approach such a difficult situation. But God will be there with us through it. He will bless us, and he offers the opportunity to serve one another. And this is one way that we can do that. So it's been a good discussion.
Let's ask for those of you who are listening and ourselves to send a card this week to a caregiver that we know. It'll be unexpected for them. But in that forum, one of the things that I read was this lady said that every now and then she would get a card from somebody, and it just completely brightened her day and just made her stop and think, and she's constantly caring for somebody else. But here was a moment when she thought, somebody cares for me and what I'm doing. So let's just all do that. Let's all pick somebody and send a card and tell them how much we love and appreciate them.
That's a great idea. I like that. All right. So shifting gears a little bit, our random question for this week. It's funny, I had forgotten what we talked about doing, but I'm glad that you remembered it anyway. Our random question this week is, do you have any unique family traditions, maybe growing up yourself or with your own family?
Okay, well, now you've changed it a little bit.
Wait, no,
So,
then how did I put it?
no, that's the first part. You said, what unique traditions do you have from growing up? So that's
Okay.
all that I was thinking about. And I actually
Okay.
found it a little bit difficult because I kind of feel like I told Neil, I said, I really can't think of anything. And he said, what? Your family did all these things, and everything that he mentioned, I said, but that's not unique. That's just like Christmas traditions or whatever.
Mhm.
It probably would have been a little easier to come up with one that we did for our own kids growing
Yeah.
up, but I wasn't thinking about that. So the one I'm going to share is not if it even counts as a tradition, but you know how in marriage there's that triangle that's supposed to be symbolic of God is at the top of the triangle, and then
Mhm.
each spouse, husband and wife, is at the bottom of the triangle. And the closer each of them gets to God, the closer
Mhm.
they get to each other, right? So there's that. Well, my parents always drew that triangle in their love letters and cards to each other, and they would put a G at the top and a Y and an M at the bottom for God, you, and me.
Mhm.
And so they would, when they'd write their name, they'd sign off with that little triangle with a GYM. And then when they started having kids, they added an OF in the center of the triangle for our family.
Mhm.
And so they carried on that tradition with my sister and me. When they would, anytime they would write us a letter or give us a card, they signed off with that triangle. And we all knew what it meant. And even so, we would do that for them. Every note, every card, every present or whatever had that triangle drawn on it. And even after I left home and got married, some of the letters that I received, well, any of the letters or cards I received from my parents still had that triangle at the bottom.
Mhm.
So that was kind of I don't know if that counts as a
Yeah.
tradition or not, but
Yeah.
that was a
That
thing.
is definitely unique. And I love that. A reminder of God being at the center of all the love in the family. That's great.
Mhm. Thanks.
Well, yours is all
What's yours?
spiritual and mine's not.
Good. No, it's yours.
Thanks. Mom always put a present at the foot of our bed on the morning of our birthday.
Oh, how fun.
It was so fun because you'd wake up because hardly could go to sleep the night before because you knew there's going to be a present on your bed.
I love that so much. I wish I could have a redo.
So, it would be, you'd think, okay, I'm going to try to stay awake and I'm going to catch her doing it. It's almost like, the Easter bunny or the tooth fairy, whatever, but there was always a present at the foot of our bed. And so we carried that over with our boys and put the present at the foot of their bed. And there were some times when I was like,
That's awesome.
I forgot. Not, I would remember right before they woke up or whatever. But, it was just a fun tradition to have
that's
something
awesome.
to, and, a lot of times on your birthday, you have to wait until everybody comes to the table before you can open your presents. And so that way you had one that you didn't have to have an audience while you're opening your first birthday present. You could just rip into it as soon as you wake up.
So it's too late to do that with my own kids, but I could start doing that with my husband.
Yeah, you could do that. Hey, I like that. I'm going to see if John will do that for me, and maybe I'll do it for him.
Oh, that's great. Good one.
Yeah, fun tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's been a good discussion, and
yeah, it's been
a heavy one.
A heavy one, yeah.
Maybe we'll do a lighthearted topic next week, but you get to choose next week. So
I'm so glad we did it, and I'm so glad, especially that you shared your experiences and your story. I feel like it was not only beautiful, but it's going to touch a lot of hearts. So thank you for doing that.
Well, it is a blessing to be able to serve God by serving other people, especially when they're people that you love. So I don't do it very well sometimes, but I'm glad for the things that I've learned. And I know that everyone out there should be giving care of some sort. And so I'm hoping, and I think it will be helpful. Hopefully, we'll pray about it. So thanks for all your input. And until next week.
Keep looking up.
Okay.
Talk to you later. Love you too. Bye.